just going to get started because I've got way too many slides, and that's what we're just going to have to do. Do I have to use this, or? Okay. Hello. All right, awesome. Just to be clear, I really like just having talks with people about this stuff, but it turns out I can't have an hour-long conversation with each of you, so I'm going to do it this way. But please feel free to talk to me and interact, and if I'm saying something that seems crazy, let me know. I am going to go quick, however, because I kept adding stuff to this, and now I've got 66 slides, and I apparently have 40 minutes, so you do the math. Let's go. I'm Scott. I do digital forensics, incident response stuff. I've done it a bunch of different places. I like whiskey. I'm a Star Wars nerd. I will take anybody on trivia if you want. I work at a company called GitHub. Has anybody heard of us? Yeah, we're a sticker company with a little bit of Git hosting on the side. It's working pretty well for us so far. This is what Wikipedia says that I do for a living. I don't really trust Wikipedia on this. I mostly do that. That slide was in because the first time I gave this talk was to a bunch of education folks, and saying digital forensics incident response really confused them. So at its core, the way I look at it, this is most of what I end up doing with my day. Collecting information on bad guys and what they're trying to do to us. Looking through network information to try to identify what happened. Looking at systems information to decide what happened on individual systems. Looking at malware, and then we wrap penetration testing and vulnerability management into our incident response program. And actually, we wrap our incident response program up in our penetration and vulnerability management program. They both go kind of hand in hand. Make sense so far? So looking at all the tools that you use, I mean, does anybody in here do forensics, incident response, anything like that? Okay. What are some tools you use on a daily basis? Volatility. Volatility, that's a good one. Anybody else? PCAPs, Wireshark, okay. So there's a hint to what the problem with a lot of these tools and a lot of the techniques we use for some of these things is. Can anybody guess? They're all made to be used solo. No, Han Solo? No? Oh, not nearly enough. It looks better on here. Anyway, so the idea of all these things being single user, kind of single techniques for single users is kind of a problem. I work at this company called GitHub, and while this isn't a talk about GitHub, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work. We do something we call optimize for happiness, and that basically means what are the things that make you as a person working at GitHub happier? And a lot of that tends to be around this idea of essentially being physically able to work wherever you want to work and work at a time that you want to work at, which is kind of important if you want to work in Scotland and everybody else is working on East Coast time or West Coast time. Getting some nods. Okay, feeling good? Okay. And so, we've done a lot of things to try to make that more effective for people. And the big two results in my mind are we've had to make everything we do asynchronous. It doesn't work very well if the person you're waiting for is on West Coast time and it's 8:30 in the morning because they don't like it when you wake them up at 5:30 in the morning. And it doesn't work if they've just decided to take the day off. So one of the things that we've done to try to make that more effective is we've put a lot of effort into how we do chat. It turns out personal interactions don't actually scale very well. If I have a conversation with Will and somebody else needs to know what's going on with it, well, there's not really a good way for me to replay the conversation we had walking to get coffee. That being said, if we have that exact same conversation sitting in a chat room, it's real easy for somebody to go back and just scroll back in that room and see what happened. Or better yet, go search for interesting tags that they might want to look at. The other thing this gives us is the ability to work on multiple devices. Again, chat can work on any device that you have a chat client for. We happen to use Campfire. Turns out there's really nice clients for Campfire using OS X, using Linux, using your iPhone or your iPad. And that's really freeing. That gives you a lot of ability to work, like I said, when you want and where you want. So we built a bunch of tools around that idea. This is what a GitHubber's day generally looks like. And by that I mean stupid pictures in chat, but also a lot of descriptions and just talking about what we're doing in that easy to understand way. How's that sound? Make some sense? Okay. One of the big tools we've built to make that more effective for us is what we call Hubot. And Hubot is, at his base, Node.js-based chatbot. He's built with CoffeeScript. Redis is the brain, and that means like the memory for the most part. Out of the box, works with Campfire and Shell, so just working on a command line, and then deployable to a number of examples. Now, as you see, all those have pluses behind them. That's because one of the other cool things about Hubot is he's been made really expandable. So the brain is normally Redis, but you can use MongoDB, or you could use Postgres if you want to. Someone was talking about Neo4j. I don't know if I think that's a great idea, but you can connect to it using anything you want. People have written their own connectors for Hubot so that he can respond in IRC, or Twilio, or Skype, or Yammer, or Twitter. This slide got really overly complicated. But the really cool thing about Hubot is this ability to build your own scripts. Hubot comes with a few built in. There's a really big community around building scripts for Hubot. And the really cool thing, though, becomes being when you build your own. And most of this came very organically for us, because we use Hubot like crazy internally. There's a number of talks, I have a link to one later, about how we use Hubot from an operations perspective. And that means everything from monitoring servers to deploying new code to updating our status site to just having conversations and interacting internally. So who likes looking at stuff like this? No, you don't. You told me you'd troll, and I expected it. But one of the great things that we've been able to do is get stuff like this out of our stack. And we call this ChatOps. And so ChatOps is this idea of taking the tools that drive our IT operations and putting them into that chat room that GitHubbers are already spending all of their time in anyway. And this does a couple different things for you. One, it's like multiplayer command line. You know, it's the ability for everybody to be in one place at one time and see how things are done. So if I ask Jesse, hey, you know, I can't remember, how do I check the status of this on that server? 9 times out of 10, he's not going to describe to me how to do it. He's just going to do it in chat. And the point is, I see what he types, I see how it responds to what he puts in, and now I understand how to do that same thing. So, and once you have a real core of these, it's the ability to go back and search for other people doing things. And it takes questions that you would have to normally go find somebody and track them down and say, explain to me how to do this, and pull it up. And instead, we just already have it sitting there, searchable, waiting to be looked at. The other thing it does, along with the reason I brought up that Nagios example, is it hides the ugly. We're able to take things that are either difficult to work with or not pleasant to work with and hide them behind this chat interface that we spend our entire day in. And the other thing going along with that idea of being device agnostic is now you can work on stuff from anywhere. Will, I'm going to bug you for a second. Where's the weirdest place you've deployed GitHub from?
Hot tub.
Did everybody hear that? This is embarrassing. Now I don't know if we should be saying this.
So there was a conference, Nordic Ruby. It's at this spot in Stockholm, and we were out in the hot tub, and I needed to deploy a hotfix to GitHub.com.
So Will has deployed GitHub.com from a hot tub at Nordic Ruby.
Yes.
I was going to say the weirdest place I've done it from was a brewery, but you win that. But the whole idea is you don't have to be at a laptop. You don't have to be sitting in your office. You don't have to be in a physical location. You have the ability to access these tools from anywhere. So this was described by Jesse, who's one of the big guys who really kind of pushed this forward at GitHub. by putting the tools in the conversation, everyone is pairing. How many people develop code? Okay, do you find any benefit in pair programming? Does pair sysadmining sound that much crazier? Ryan Tomeko, another GitHubber, said, we teach by doing things, by making them visible. In too many IT operations, security operations, there's too much hidden knowledge. There's too many things where people have to go ask the right person or know the right question. And in this case, we have everything in one place, easy to look up and see how people have done it multiple times before. So everything I've been talking about so far has been for IT operations and deploying code and stuff like that. But I don't do that. I do incident response. And I got a little frustrated that Hubot didn't do enough incident response kind of stuff for me. So basically, I wanted a sidekick. And being a Star Wars nerd, the greatest sidekick of all time is obviously Chewbacca. I don't even know. But we're talking about robots here, so the best robotic sidekick of all time, definitely War Machine. So my goal was to turn Hubot into War Machine. And essentially, we wanted to adapt chat ops for incident response. We want to automate common incident response tasks. How many people do the same thing every day? I mean, there's a lot of things that are really common, really boilerplate that we can automate away. I can collaborate with others. I have a number of people who do incident response work at GitHub who aren't incident responders. And the ability for me to collaborate and work with them directly in this chat interface that we're already using is hugely important. I've been able to lead incident responses from a brewery, from my grandmother's basement, from anywhere I happen to be. I don't have to worry about whether my laptop's out, whether I have my hotspot set up, whether I'm at home, whether I'm in a particular office. And that lets me experience more things that I might not experience if I was afraid that something might come down and I need to be sitting at my desk waiting for it instead of going out to dinner. And I got to learn some new stuff. So the GitHub motto is kind of making it easier to work together than alone. So my motto for this was making it easier to respond to incidents together than alone. And the other thing about it is we already did all these things. So many of the operations things we already do were security related. We were manipulating our firewalls from chat. We were interacting with Nagios and system problems from chat. Deploying new code, including security fixes and things like that, all done from chat. So I talked about, these are the things that I do on a daily basis. And these are some things that I built to try to make it easier in chat for me to do those things on a daily basis. Just some really straightforward Hubot actions, generate code names. Does anybody use Pipple? Oh, it's scary. It's kind of cool. Pipple is a social network aggregator. So you put in an email address, and all of a sudden you see all those blog posts you had from 1996. Integrated with Yara, we're able to look things up in VirusTotal, geolocate information, access my web of trust directly. Shodan is another great one. And take these tools that people weren't used to and put them all into a format that they easily understand. That, again, has all those benefits of being asynchronous, being mobile, things like that. I was also able to take advantage of some community modules that are already available. Deadline, in particular, is really nice. If you tell somebody you're going to send them a report by such and such a time, to put that in there is really nice. So you see where I'm going here. Any questions? Okay.
Chat, you talk about kind of making it easier, but what's your overhead in terms of talking to Hubot, having other people also saying things? Do you know what I mean? How are you able to run the scene?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm definitely going to show that later, but I'll give you a short answer now. The question was, what's the overhead? What's the I think I understand what you're saying, but what comes along with that you might not necessarily want? The toughest thing can be, I've definitely been in some hectic situations where you don't really, there's no idea of threads in a chat app like that. So sometimes I've seen 3 different people having 3 different discussions in a similar room. Now, generally speaking, that gets sorted out really quickly. And, okay, I'm handling this. We're going to move that over here. It especially happens in our ops rooms because security problems start as ops problems sometimes. And so we'll be in there, and then all of a sudden someone will go, let's kick this over to a security room. It helps that at this point at GitHub we're running close to 200 some rooms. So you can generally find a quiet one to go talk, but that's generally the biggest problem. Aside from that, the great thing about it really is everyone's so used to that mode that people are really good at understanding how to do that themselves that works effectively. So I'm going to get into a bunch of code now. So what do you got?
Security consideration for your chat client, 'cause that seems like a lot of
Yes. I mean, we definitely have some concerns because you're right. Hubot gives a lot of power. We've had to have some tough discussions about, like, do we let contractors into rooms where Hubot exists? The answer, by the way, is no. We spent a lot of time to do, we have application security reviews of Hubot. Does Hubot have security controls? Yeah, I mean, the APIs he works around are generally pretty tight. So we're able to limit him as much as we can. But the problem is, the tough thing is that's the balancing act. Like, the power of it is that he can do so much, and is that so many people can work through this one common interface. Now, that being said, things like having records of all conversations going back as far as we've used him make it a little bit safer to at least be able to go back and audit and see what happened. We still have all the controls around the tools that he accesses as well. But yeah, it's definitely something that we've put a lot of time into thinking about, and how can we minimize those risks without taking away the real benefits.
And I'm assuming something basic like not every user can issue every command?
So it depends on the command. We have different controls around different things. A lot of it's based on what room you're in. So we're able to say, like, hey, if you're in the finance room, you probably shouldn't be redeploying .com.
So where versus who?
Where and who. I mean, we use both of these as are necessary. Any other? I saw somebody back there. No? We're good? Cool. All right, let's get into some code. So writing Hubot scripts. Hubot's written in CoffeeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript that basically tries to make JavaScript you can write without putting var everywhere. I thought of it a lot when I first looked at it, like what happened with JavaScript and Python kind of merged together. The great thing is there's a ton of examples. The Hubot scripts repository is a bunch of community-built scripts. I was pretty much able to figure out everything I needed to build just by copying little bits and pieces out of there. I'm not a developer. I just string together Stack Overflow searches until my stuff works. The one thing I will warn you is documentation matters. Hubot actually derives some of the, when you ask Hubot, hey, what do you know how to do? He derives that from the documentation in each of the scripts that you have. So poorly documented scripts can really come back and bite you. Like, when I had 3 scripts that all had the exact same documentation, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't issue that one command. So that's it. Like, this is a really simple kind of template of a Hubot script that I based a lot of the stuff I built off of. So we have the documentation, quick description, what dependencies you need. That commands one, that's what gets pulled in when you search for what Hubot can do. This is how you do API keys, which, yeah, you don't hard code credentials, right? Right? Okay. I didn't say people don't. I said you don't. If we go look at your GitHub account, what are we going to find? So, break out the URL commands, and then here's where it starts to get fun. So this is a little regular expression that's essentially saying, what is Hubot going to respond to? So in this case, he's going to respond to any reference to test me. Pretty simple. And then basically, he's going to send back a response that says, if I actually was able to make an HTTP connection to that, we're going to respond with good things. Otherwise, we're going to respond with bad things. I'm going to give a little bit less hypothetical example in a bit. The other one that you need to watch out for is this idea of the previous one. You actually see had robot respond. This one has This one has robot here. So Hubot can do two things. You can either address Hubot directly, and he will respond to whatever you say, or he can listen to everything going through chat, and he can just respond when he sees something he recognizes. This can be really useful and really irritating really quickly. I played around with the thing for a while where every time he'd see an IP address, he'd like spit back a bunch of information about it. Yeah, that got really irritating really fast. But it can be useful in its own places. People end up using a lot of random commands. So pretty simple, just message send, message random. And in this case, it'll give you 1 of 5 different pictures of ship it squirrels.
Is the bot listening to all chats or just your chats, or depending on how you write the script? Can you write a script where it listens to all the chats in all rooms?
I was going to say I'm not the NSA, but I'm working on it. No, I get your point. So Hubot can specifically be configured to be in whatever rooms you want him to be. And that depends a lot on the chat adapter that's based on. So for instance, if you're using the built-in Campfire adapter, you'll say, here's what server you're gonna, here's the server you're gonna be going to, here's what rooms on that server I want you listening in at. So you do have to be explicit with that, where if you create a new room and you want Hubot in it, you have to add that room to it.
And anybody in the chat rooms can write a script for Hubot to hear or monitor different phrases or words.
So you do need to have whatever method of deploying Hubot you're using. You do have to have access to that. So for instance, I run a personal Hubot for some friends, and if you wanted to commit a new script to that, you'd have to SSH into my VPS, and you'd have to add it there and then push that up to Heroku. So you can have as much or as little control around that as you want to. Cool? All right, we looked at message random. All right, so here's actually a real script that I'm using, and this is for just doing some basic reverse DNS. So the documentation says he's going to be listening for the command Hubot reverse DNS and then an IP address. That's right up here. The API URL is what service I'm actually using to run this off of. It's a JSON thing called api.hackertarget.com. So essentially, as soon as he sees that phrase, he's going to take the IP address just using a regular expression. He's going to send that to the reverse DNS server, and then it comes back with a status code 200, meaning he actually managed to talk to that site. Great, it just responds reverse DNS and then the IP address. If not, it'll just come back and say, hey, I couldn't get to that API. Pretty simple. Everybody see where I'm going? What's up? If I was using I got to be honest, I haven't tried that one. I don't know if I don't know what the default response would be. I mean, that would be, I think, a Node.js thing, but I could look at it and let you know. So here's another pretty straightforward one, a little bit more complicated. This is just doing some basic geolocation using a service called hostip.info. And essentially, you give it an IP address. It's going to submit that to them, get back the JSON, parse it out, and then send back a little phrase to you. That's this right down here. So So here's the problem with all this. This has been working fairly well, but how many people in here code CoffeeScript? Come on, Will. Yeah, I know. The fact is most security folks are not CoffeeScripters, and I get that. And I worked with some friends, and they wanted to build some stuff, but they didn't want to take the time to learn CoffeeScript. So in an effort to try to make that a little easier and to carry a theme entirely too far, I created a little something to go with this called Roddy. Roddy Rhodes, by the way, being the guy who was in the War Machine suit. Like I said, I carry themes too far. And essentially, this is just a small Python endpoint using a little thing called Flask that basically you can expose this endpoint running on your own server and write whatever you want in Python and then just make a really basic call to essentially query that and then post it back into chat. So the other thing I really wanted to do was take advantage of things that already exist. So let's say I pull some kind of image and I want to run it through something like volatility. I can actually take advantage of things like volatility by just building this in Python rather than being stuck using nothing but CoffeeScript. The other reason I really wanted to do this was there were certain connections I didn't really want the people on the other end to know about. So being able to use something like this, I can now play with my network settings to be able to route my connections through Tor or some other proxy system. And then there's a number of them that just I can do locally that ended up being really useful. Like say I wanted to image a hard drive directly. I could just shell out through Python, have that set up the terminal command, and run it that way. So this is literally all Roddy is at this point. That's a basic little hello world where you essentially just define a method, hello world, return whatever you wanted to send back, and then you put that little @app declaration at the top to say what URL that's going to be going to. Simple, easy. You're all submitting pull requests tonight? All right, well. Here's a little bit more complicated version of the same thing. So this is one to actually query against the MaxMind database. Downside of using CoffeeScript, I couldn't use MaxMind, which gets me a much more effective geolocation than using some of the free services out there. So in this case, I was able to just write this little Python endpoint that if it gets IP / the IP address / geo / MaxMind JSON, it just responds back with the actual JSON information to the CoffeeScript, and then I'm using the CoffeeScript to parse that out.
This is web server code we're looking at, right?
This is web server code.
Looks similar to Django.
So Flask is a simplified web framework. So yes, it should look a little similar, but it's a lot more straightforward. You really just put it as a method and then a decorator to say here's what the URL for that method is. And the idea is you could run this on whatever server you wanted and just have those have Hubot call back into this to do the more complicated stuff in Python rather than in CoffeeScript. So here's the exact same thing. I just had it do the same thing with a call out to an API. And then that's actually the CoffeeScript to respond to those two endpoints. So in this case, they're both basically doing the exact same thing. There's really very little change except for kind of aesthetic differences to say, like, when Hubot responds to the one, he says, oh, this is information from MaxMind versus from IPinfo. And then, do people want me to walk through that code, or are we starting to feel like we've got we've got it? All right. So I still want to build a couple more things to make this a lot easier. Hubot doesn't, by default, understand some data types that are really useful. So be able to say things like, is this an IP address? For if somebody submits something to a URL service and they submit an IP address, it'd be really nice to be able to respond a little bit more effectively to them. So I'd really like to build kind of a helper CoffeeScript library that'll make some of that stuff easier for people. The list is a huge gist I have that has about 60 different Hubot actions I'd really like to add to this. Kyle Maxwell is slowly transitioning them to issues on my repo for this, which makes me feel like I've got way too much work to do. And then I've gotten a few pull requests so far. I'm hoping to get some more. And the ultimate idea for this is I'm really just trying to take the Unix philosophy and apply it better to security tools. You know, the whole idea of the Roddy framework, nothing says you have to use that with Hubot. I mean, all it is exposing an endpoint for doing some really common things that security folks do. And so, you know, being able to build tools like this that interact over really common frameworks like JSON or just sending straight text, you know, allow you to interact with not just Hubot, but things like Maltego or internal tools and things like that. So last time I did this, people asked me a lot about what my Hubot setup looks like. I do most of my development just from terminal, running on the command line. It looks a lot like that. You get used to it. But more commonly, I share a chat room with a few people. It's a campfire-based chat room. I'm running Hubot, built off my DigitalOcean VPS, running on Heroku, all free. I use the Flint for that as a client. We call him Woodhouse. And I said I wouldn't do this, but OK. So does anybody want to see what I'm talking about? All right. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. Oh. So actually, we have a solution for that. Anybody have a favorite IP address? 8.8.8.8. Oh, now everybody picks that one. Come on. 192.30252.123. All right. Oh, Shodan doesn't know anything about it. Well, that's good. I'm glad they don't know anything about it. Just a second. Go ahead. 194.141.0.3. Oh, I used the wrong command. Oh, man, we're not coming up on Shodan. All right, we're going to try one more. 208.67. 220.220. Man, doesn't someone have a good SCADA server somewhere that I can scan?
There's only 4 million left.
So what you've now seen is the infamous pug bomb. And a pug bomb is when someone does something too terrible that you need to get it off the screen as quickly as possible. So that's that. We'll try one more thing. I unfortunately need some. There you go. Let's see. Look some stuff up. This is pulling stuff up on VirusTotal instead. Oh, look, VirusTotal does have 100 samples connecting to that particular IP address and one URL. Sorry? Doesn't surprise me. I mean, we can continue this and see. We can get some reputation information on that OpenDNS thing. Okay, not bad. which I don't know. Anyway, so I could show people more later if you want to see it. I know I'm getting close to the end of my time, so let's see. Go back to. Anyway, we did that. So the takeaway: it is way more fun, way better, way faster, way more flexible to respond to incidents together than alone. You can use Qbot to automate, collaborate, mobilize, and beautify. It flows way too well. I can't help saying it that way. And CoffeeScript has a couple of core patterns that make it really easy to build new scripts. The other thing about this is I will urge everyone here, this was easy. Like, I didn't do anything terribly complicated, but writing a little bit of code can actually make everyone's life a lot easier. So if you don't already, learn to ship some code. Those are a bunch of links. I'll have this up online, and I'll say something on my Twitter account or something like that about it. But those are useful if you're interested in Qbot, interested in building some of this stuff, or just getting some more information. Shout out to a bunch of people who helped me out a lot with this. That's how you can find me. Any questions? So that's been done. It's funny for a little bit, and then it gets dark. Yeah, I mean, you can. I've seen that done, and you can do some fun things with it, but I haven't gone that far with that. So,
to the extent that you're working on a particular incident and you're running the information in the chat, maybe with someone else, how do you roll that up into future tracking? I mean, I know you can search back to this, but do you not want to collate all the information around a particular thing somewhere?
So that's one of the next big problems I'm trying to tackle, and I've got some ideas on that. But I mean, that is a significant problem right now. Being able to search effectively is hugely beneficial alone, but it's not always the way that data could most effectively be used. So talk to me about that afterwards.
In the interim, do you do anything where Qbot says, "Oh, you were looking at this the other day"? Kind of, it reminds you, or says someone else was looking at this also?
So Qbot will notice like shared references to things in kind of a minimal way. I mean, honestly, right now, most of that data, when we track it, we use a series of templates I put together and track it in just plain text. And that works pretty effectively. It's also searchable, but I do think there's better ways to approach that. So.
We've got the issue syncing as well. So if you post a link to a GitHub issue or a pull request in chat, Qbot will go ahead and capture the link to the transcript of that position, and he will actually comment on the issue with a link and the message that mentioned that issue. So you can quickly find chat transcripts talking about issues and pull requests.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to be around the rest of the day and tomorrow. I've got a ton of stickers, and happy to talk about this stuff with people. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.